Oh, I heard I could decline this part if I wanted to. I am Nick. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for asking me to speak. I have been dreading it for the last 2 months, and I'm glad to finally be getting it over with. No newcomers. Wow. And no birthdays. So welcome to no one. Congrats to no one. Kind of stealing my thunder there. Just to set expectations, I have tried over the years to get a firm answer on when the speaker meeting night is supposed to end. And I keep getting, I asked last week and they said until you're done, when you finish your story. But also Pat said nobody's ever been angry at a short speaker. So, that said, if 8:30 does roll around and I'm still up here yapping and you need to leave, it will not hurt my feelings at all. It really won't. Another thing, sort of setting expectations, as you've heard, or maybe you haven't, or maybe you've forgotten, no one person speaks for AA, and I would never claim to do that. I don't speak for this group, my home group, my sponsor, who is in the room right now, or anybody else. It's just my experience. My only hope in doing this is that I share something somebody can relate with. I would prefer it if you were impressed with the stuff I said and you liked me, but that's not really my goal. Also, I'm a firm believer that when speaking, the language of the heart is often the stuff that's most impactful. And I've found that if I write stuff down or plan stuff out, I have not been planning for the last 2 months what I was going to say tonight. It comes off as insincere, but I have this little note card here because I have this irrational fear of not being heard or understood. So I have a tendency to over-explain. So this is just to keep me on track and make sure that we're not here until 9:30 me explaining to you what third grade was like. So I hope that's okay. So to qualify, my sobriety date is March 19th of 2008. My home group is the Murray Group. It meets on Wednesday nights, just about a mile up the street from here. I do have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor. He's in the room. So there's that. I do sponsor other guys. My favorite color is red, and I don't like pineapple. What else do you guys want to know? So that's my qualifier here. If I look too young to be 16 years sober, it's because I am. It was not my plan to get sober a few weeks short of my 20th birthday and stay sober. It's certainly not what I wanted to do, and I never envisioned that this would be my life. When I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous this last time, I had the gift of desperation, but it was not to be sober. It was just to stop hurting and to get some of the stuff that I'd heard you guys talk about. I wanted what you had. I was desperate for what you had, because what I had really sucked, and I didn't enjoy it. But I think that's kind of like an indicator of most of my life is that it hasn't been my plan. It was never my plan to start drinking and doing other dry goods when I was 13 or 14 years old. It wasn't my plan that I would get kicked out of high school. It wasn't my plan that I would attempt suicide when I was 15 years old. Nor was it my plan that I would enter my senior year of high school a full-blown heroin addict. But shit happens, and some things are just outside of your control. That said, drugs are a part of my story. I'll try and keep it very brief. Since joining Alcoholics Anonymous and essentially growing up in AA, I've become an adult through the AA process, and that's not to say that I've done it perfectly, but it's been an interesting process, and I've really enjoyed it. The life that I have today is nothing short of amazing. If I were to write it all out on a piece of paper for you and show it to you, you might not be all that impressed, but to me, it impresses the shit out of me, and it's a direct result of the stuff that you guys taught me, the things I've experienced in here, and the work that I've done in the steps. So like I said, I started drinking and using when I was 13 or 14 years old. I did it out of peer pressure because I was really trying to fit in. I grew up a very, very, very awkward person. I grew up with a mom who raised me by herself. My dad had this other family. I never really felt like I fit in there. I didn't feel like I could talk to my mom about anything. And she did the best with what she had. I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing my mom, but she really liked to get engaged. So we moved a lot. And, it's like as soon as I would move to a new spot, and like I started to develop a friend or a couple friends, it was time to move again. So some of those critical social skills were a little dull for me. And I think I did the math when I got sober. By the time I was 19 years old, I'd moved just as many times. So I went to a bunch of different schools and just never really felt like I fit in. It didn't matter who I was talking to or engaging with. It just always felt like something was missing. Like you had the cliff notes on the topic, and I'm sitting there trying to figure it out as I go. I just always felt like that. As long as I can remember back, I just always felt like I was a step behind. And, when drugs and alcohol were put in front of me, again, it wasn't my plan to do that, but it was just like, well, these cool people are doing it, and I want to be a cool person, so I guess I'll do it. And, I wish I could say that it was just like really, really fun and a party right out of the gate, but it wasn't. It became an obsession for me almost immediately. I remember at some point in 8th grade, some kid that I talked to out in the hall, before English class, I was asking him like, so are we gonna after school today? And he was like, dude, that is all you talk about anymore. That's all you want to do. And I'm like, yeah, what else would you want to do or talk about? Like, it's the best thing ever. And what I didn't realize it was doing for me is it was taking away that feeling of less than, that lack. I didn't realize it was doing that for me, but that's what it was doing. And, I guess I did have some fun, but man, the trouble and the problems piled up really quickly for me. Like I said, I got kicked out of a high school because they didn't know what to do with me. I ended up in another high school for kids who didn't fare so well in public school. And the idea was to put me into a safe environment where I couldn't just leave anytime I wanted. But what they didn't realize is they were putting me into a situation with more people just like me. And all of a sudden it went from just like drinking and smoking a little bit to I have access to things I've only ever seen on TV and in movies. And again, it's like, the cool people are doing it, so sure, I'll snort that or I'll smoke that or whatever. It was just never even a thought for me. It was never a plan, it just happened. And what I realize now, sort of through the 12-step process, is alcoholism. I don't know if I crossed an invisible line in the sand or if I was born that way. All I know is that I got it. And things spiraled out of control really quick. I went to rehab a couple times. And, I was able to admit in those situations and environments that, like, obviously there's a bit of a drug problem here, hence the heroin addict at 17 years old. But I just hadn't really drank enough to know, like, I'm not an alcoholic, Those people at the Ilano Club, at the meetings that they take us to, they are alcoholics, for sure. And I'm glad they have this thing, but I certainly don't need it. I did like that at the time you could smoke in the Ilano Club. And the guy who was my sponsor would always take me to the Friday night meeting and he'd buy me a steak and we'd go to the 8 o'clock meeting. So I liked those parts about AA. But the stuff you guys said, it was just like, not for me. So, life continued to spiral. It continued to get worse. I continued to feel more isolated, alone, afraid, terror, bewilderment, and fear, that stuff it talks about in the big book, the restlessness, irritability, and discontentment. The substances kind of stopped taking that away. But I didn't know any other way to live, so I just continued living that way. And the thing I held on to for a long time is, despite all my brushes with police, I had never been arrested. And I thought, for sure, in order for someone to be an alcoholic, they have to have been arrested, at least once. And turns out I didn't have to wait that long. I think it was maybe 6 or 9 months after I left my second treatment center, it happened, the thing I'd been waiting for. And the best part is that I don't remember a single moment of it. I had become a blackout drinker. I was drinking basically all day, every day, and every other time I drank was a blackout. So I remember it was just a regular Saturday night. I was at a party at some random 18 and up club that no longer exists, that was in South Salt Lake. And I remember like leaving that party, waving goodbye to people to go to another party, and then I woke up on a concrete floor. And I didn't know why I was there. My vitals were so off the charts, they wouldn't let me out of the drunk tank so that they could read me my charges. They just kept giving me Gatorade and their shitty jail food. And I'm like, can someone please tell me why I'm here? Finally, they let me out and they read me my charges. It was a DUI and minor in possession of alcohol. And everything that I know about that experience, I know from the very detailed police report. And some of it at the time was super embarrassing, soul-crushing at the time, considering my experience with drugs, alcohol, sobriety, all that stuff. But now it's just really funny. So the officer pulled me over. He asked me, "Do you know why I have pulled you over?" I looked him dead in the face and I said, "No, officer, I don't. I was driving on a completely shredded front tire, going 45 miles an hour. And I guess when they suspect DUI, they ask the person, 'Do you know what road you're on and which direction you're going?' And I said, 'Yes, I'm heading southbound on State Street.' I was heading northbound on Redwood." Not even close. Apparently, I was very honest and forthright. He asked, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "Yes." He had me get out and do the, field sobriety things. I failed all of them. Probably the best part was the additional comments on the arrest report. So I had just been in rehab, right? Just a few months before that, kind of bounced in and out of AA. The officer wrote AA literature strewn about the vehicle. Which, it just felt really good to read that when I read it, I'm pretty sure, I had, a stack of flyers for, a conference that was coming up. There was, a 12 and 12 that I was probably using to crush up pills on. I don't know. It was all over the place. And then when I went for my sentencing, the judge called me a heavy metal rock star because my BAC was .32. So anyway, you would think that would be enough. And I remember sitting in central holding when they finally let me out of the drunk tank. And they've just read me my charges. They say, "Sit tight, we'll let you out in just a little bit." And with all my experience and all the stuff I'd gone through and all the pleading from my parents, from my family, from school, from everybody, from people in AA, I knew it was time to stop. I knew it was time to do something different. And I remember sitting on that concrete bench, looking up at the concrete ceiling, thinking to myself, this has to stop. I've got to do something about this now before it gets even more out of control. I'm almost crying, and I'm trying not to because you're not supposed to cry in jail. I called that guy who had been my sponsor before in AA. I told him what was going on. I said, "I'm ready. Let's do this." I went home. I told my mom, "This is what happened. Don't worry. I'm going to go back to AA." And 12 hours after I was released, I got high again. Wasn't even a thought. Wasn't a plan. I had access to it, and I did it. And if I look back over my drinking career, countless vain attempts to prove, not that I could drink like other people, but just that I had it under control, And then it was also kind of countless vain attempts to prove that I could drink like an absolute psychopath and have it not ruin my life. And it just proved to not work out. So I continued to drink for another couple weeks. I gotta get sober here. Continued to drink for another couple weeks, and then again, another thing I didn't plan on. It was a day after St. Patrick's Day. I woke up and I had my moment of clarity. I didn't ask for it, didn't want it. It happened. Basically, somebody had left me a voicemail. That guy who was my sponsor in AA just called to check in on me and left a voicemail. Of course, I skipped his call, and his voicemail basically just said, "Hey, man, I don't know what you're doing. I have a pretty good idea. I don't want to know what you're doing. I just wish you would like call me back and let me know that you're okay. And it was that thought in that moment of what I was doing to him and everybody else in my life that just cracked me wide open. And it was like a red LED sign flashed across the inside of my brain, and it said, if you don't do something about this now, your life is only going to get worse and you're going to die. And I didn't ask for that. I didn't plan on that. I didn't want that. But it hit me so hard, I knew that it was time. So I took my sorry ass back to the Alano Club, the 8 o'clock meeting. I sat as close as I could to the podium, stood up as a newcomer again, and I've stayed here ever since. It has been a wild journey for me, to say the least. I hung out in AA for a while, just went to meetings because I thought that's what AA was. I didn't know there was this other stuff. I got really miserable in that first few months. And then finally, from the podium, again at that 8 o'clock meeting, I heard my story. It was some guy who was picking up an 11-year chip, and it was like, that's the guy. I need to talk to him. As I mentioned earlier, social skills weren't really that sharp. So I kind of like stalked him for like a couple weeks, I just wasn't ready to ask him. It's like I'd see him and I'd be like, oh, there he is. Not tonight. So finally I got the courage and I asked him, and he sat down with me for like 30 minutes outside the Alano Club under that big fucking tree, and he qualified me as an alcoholic, something that nobody had ever done before. And he said, if you want what I have, which you've heard me share apparently a couple weeks ago when I picked up a chip, here's how we do it. You show up at my house every Tuesday, 7 p.m., we read the book. When a step comes up, we take the step. And that's what we did. I thought it was really drastic the way that he took me through the steps. He wanted to do like a step a week. And I was like, what about that thing about like slowing down and, was the take it easy, those things they have up on the wall? It's like, I think we should slow this down a little bit. The only thing I've ever done in moderation is the 12 steps. But it was like step one, I had done my research. I knew, I just needed words to put to it. So the first 43 pages of the book, it's like I just kept relating and relating and relating. And I didn't want to. I didn't plan on relating. It just happened. So, I took step one and didn't really feel relief, but it was like, okay, I've identified the problem. I'm ready. And then I saw the word God in step two. Well, power greater than ourselves. And I went, shit. Do you have anything else? Is there another way that we can do this? I remember the very moment when I put the God idea up on a shelf. And it's when I was 15 years old, sitting in seminary at the high school that I would eventually get kicked out of. I never went to seminary, but the one time I did show up, the teacher's up there and he's giving his lesson and he's explaining why people go to seminary and the benefits that it offers. And it was the last thing he said that kind of killed the whole thing for me. He's like, seminary and the church is what keeps you from stealing at stores. It's what keeps you from having premarital sex. It's also what keeps you from going out into the parking lot and smoking a joint with your friends. And I look down at my backpack that has a pint of vodka in it and a bag of weed. And I'm like, no one's stopping me from doing that. And I took the God idea, put it on a shelf and said, no more for me. I grew up in the religion that is kind of common here. Never really felt like a part of it. So when I came to AA and they said, hey, you got to do this God thing, I was really bummed out about it. I wasn't agnostic. I wasn't an atheist. I'm not smart enough. I was just apathetic. It was like, nothing up there is going to stop me from what I'm doing down here. So I don't know what to tell you. But my sponsor, being kind of the intense person that he was, when we got to those questions, the proposition that we have to fearlessly face the idea that God is either everything or is nothing, he kind of asked me that question with a finger in my face. And then later on, when it says, who are you to say there is no God? It was like, okay, well, I'm out of options, so I guess I'll try this. And fortunately for me, as it says kind of more in step 2 in the 12 and 12. You just need that little bit of willingness, just a little bit. The door cracks open, and then you can take the rest of your life opening it further. And that's what I did. The God thing was uncomfortable. Sometimes it still is. It's contradictory to a lot of things that I believe and feel, but also, I had a sponsor when I was 7 years sober tell me, get a different God then. Just get a different God. Like, if that's not working for you, get a different God. I was like, okay, I didn't realize I could do that as many times as I wanted. I thought maybe there was a limit. But like I said, I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I celebrated my 21st birthday in the Sugar House Men's Group, and no one gave a shit. Somebody called on me to share, and I was like, it's my 21st birthday. And I've been sober for blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, good job. It's just another Monday, That's also where I got my first service commitment. I had the very esteemed title of Cookie Boy. And boy, did I take that job very seriously. I was always worried that people weren't going to like the cookies, or I wouldn't make the coffee right, or I wouldn't set up the chairs exactly how they were supposed to be. And actually, it was going through that 9-month service commitment that I came out on the other side of it a bleeding deacon. Because when I was done with it, I was like, no one is setting up the chairs the right way. The cookies are shitty. The coffee tastes burnt. And it was like, they should really just let me come back and run the show again. But it was also at that meeting where I met the first guy that I ever sponsored. I was not ready for that experience. Didn't plan on that experience. I'd been sober maybe 9 months. I'd just started making amends in the 9th step. Some dude walks up to me and he said, hey man, I really like some of the stuff you have to say. Would you like to be my sponsor? And I froze, because I don't have a year yet. I'm not through the 12 steps yet. I can't do that. But fortunately, my sponsor was standing behind him and heard him ask me that question. And I just see his head go. It's like, sure, man. Sure, let's figure this out. I've completely stopped looking at this. Anyway, a lot has happened since I've gotten sober. I am approaching a milestone, and every time I come up on a birthday, I always have this weird dissociative thing where it's like, was that really my life? Did that really happen? 15, 16 years ago, that feels like a lifetime ago. But fortunately, I kept my first 4th step, and I can open it anytime I want and go, oh yeah, no, that stuff really did happen. But not all of it has been bad. Not all of it's been good. A lot of it's just been. But you guys showed me how to show up. You showed me how to be a decent human being, how to be an adult, a man among men. And I've got to experience some pretty cool stuff since getting here. I've repaired a lot of those relationships, as it's already been discussed. It's funny, I resented my dad for years because I thought he abandoned me and my mom and all this stuff. I wrote out his name on my 4-step, and by the time I got to column 4, that resentment was gone. And I didn't think that was ever going to happen. His wife, my stepmom, I don't use the C word very casually, but if there was somebody that qualified for it, I always thought it was her. Through the 4-step and 9th-step process, today I can look that woman in the face and tell her I love her. And I can give her a hug, and I mean it. I love that woman. She did the best she could with what she had. I was not an easy stepkid to raise, and I love having her in my life. Mom, that relationship is still complicated, but I'm working on it. I was able to go back to school. I was able to get 4 college degrees, and that's not because I'm super smart. It's because I hung out at Salt Lake Community College long enough that when I got my associate's degree, they're like, you have enough credits, you just want another one? And I said, sure, yeah. So I took that. I went to the University of Utah, I got my bachelor's degree, and then I got bored during the pandemic and decided, why not get a master's degree? So I did that, and I paid way too much for it. But, these are things that I just did not think I was capable of doing. Going back to the things that I have planned and not planned, my plan was I was going to be the guitar player for a slightly successful metal band, and then I was going to die of an overdose at 25. Those were my prospects. I did not think I was going to make it to 25. So I did that. I think at 8 years sober, I married a woman who I met in this fellowship. It was this amazing, wonderful thing. 2 years later, we got divorced. It was great. I highly recommend at 10 years sober, everybody get a divorce. Really tests your spiritual condition. At 4 years sober, I became such a bleeding deacon that I almost took myself out of here. I became so disconnected from the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew AA so much better than everybody else. I didn't feel like a part of anymore. And at 4.5 years, basically until I got 5, I woke up every day and planned how I was going to kill myself because I had become that disconnected from AA. And fortunately, somebody realized what I was going through. They forced me into a car with 9 other people and took me to Wacky Paw down in Tucson. And that sort of turned things around for me. And since I've really tried to do the elder statesman thing. I'm not the best at it, but I really try. Okay, so we're coming up on 8:30 now, and I'm going to wrap this up. Everything I have today is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the stuff that you taught me. It's the stuff that all these giants who went before me taught me. Stan Henderson, Carl Beard, Fireman Mike Fredrickson. God, those guys they didn't give a shit that I showed up at 19 years old. They just said, if you're an alcoholic, and it sounds like you are, sit down, we have a solution for you. And that's what they did. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the people in it. And I think that's all I have. Thanks.